Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Sports Legends of the Carolinas. I'm your host, Scott Fowler, sports columnist for the Charlotte Observer, where I've worked since 1994. And in this podcast, I travel across the Carolinas, seeking out some of my favorite sports legends and asking them to tell me the stories behind their rise to iconic status. Now, for this episode of Sports Legends, we're back in our podcast studio in Charlotte, and I'm happy to have with me George Shinn, the original owner of the Charlotte Hornets.
Kempton with 5 seconds, cross court to Reed. 20-footer blocked by Jordan. Tip Rambus, no. Rebound battle, Rambus lays it in. Game's over. Charlotte wins the game.
Once upon a time in the Queen City, way back in the 70s and 80s, there were two main sports in our area that dominated: NASCAR and pro wrestling, which most of my friends called wrestling. I mean, a lot of people didn't even know exactly what state Charlotte was in, as you'll hear from this interview. And then George Shinn came along, and suddenly, somehow, Charlotte had a professional sports identity and an NBA team. Shinn was complicated, controversial, charismatic. The Charlotte Hornets are here largely because of him, but they also left for a time largely because people lost confidence in him. That happened when Shinn was sued for sexual assault. His trial was nationally televised on Court TV in 1999. A jury acquitted Shinn, but on the witness stand he had to admit to questionable behavior, including 2 sexual relationships with women other than his then wife. It tarnished his relationship with the city and with Hornets fans. In 2001, voters in Charlotte rejected a referendum that would have built the Hornets a new arena. In large part, that vote was considered a personal rejection of Shinn. But the Hornets are back in Charlotte now, and they never would have gotten here in the first place without George Shinn. Don't forget to pre-order your copy of the Sports Legends book at sportslegendsbook.com. And here's George Shinn next on Sports Legends of the Carolinas. George, welcome to the show.
My pleasure.
Really glad to have you. And let's start off because you are one of the people, Sports Legends of the Carolinas, that truly grew up in the Carolinas. So tell me about what life was like growing up for you.
Well, I grew up in a mill town, cotton mill, Cannon Mills, Kannapolis, North Carolina. My dad had been married. His wife died when she was 28 years old of cancer. They had 3 children. My mom had 1 child from a previous marriage, and she was divorced. They got married and had little George. I'm George Shinn Jr., and my dad died of a stroke when he was 50 years old, and he had a lot of bills that had to be paid. He was a businessman, and he, with him gone, it was they had to sell our property, our home, to pay off his debts, and it was quite a struggle for my mom. It was just me and my mom, and my dad owned a Gulf service station, and Mom kept it working, operating. They sold groceries. We had a few acres, and he sold tomatoes and vegetables and things like that, and at the store. And after he died, she continued to keep it going. She would actually pump gas. We survived because of welfare. The state sent us a monthly check to get by. I had hand-me-down clothes, and I got kidded about it a lot when I was in school with clothes too big. My mom said I would grow into them. And I got free lunches when I was in school too. And so we struggled. But during that time, I had a lot of criticism because a lot of the kids in school heard I was getting free lunches, and I started getting a lot of kidding about it, and it really hurt my feelings. And I just remember my mom was a person of faith, and she kept encouraging me to don't let other people pull you down with their words or whatever. You just be strong. You be a strong person. And she always told me a very simple principle that I've tried to pattern my whole life on, is that I could do anything on this planet I wanted to if I put God first and if I worked my butt off. and she said that God will, if you give back, God will reward you tenfold. And so later on in my career, that just came back to me. Of course, I love sports. I was a baseball nut. I love baseball. And I got hooked on that early. And obviously, you can look at me and tell I wasn't a basketball player. But
people can't see you on the podcast. How tall are you?
Back in now, I shrunk a little bit. I'm 81 years old. So, but back in my high school days, I still got the same weight. I weighed 145, and I was 5'7". That was on the football roster when I played. And now I'm 5'6", and I have to stretch it to be there, if you want to know the truth. But it's it's been a wonderful ride. It's been quite an experience, and I feel like that part of my calling or mission was to try to help others and do things to serve others. That's my focus.
Charlotte has been the beneficiary of your generosity many times, and we'll get into some of that as well. Now, high school, Kannapolis, for those who don't know, about 35 minutes or something from Charlotte, I guess. Did you go to A.L. Brown?
A.L. Brown High School, right.
Okay. And is it apocryphal, or is it true that you were dead last in your graduating class?
Well, here's the story. What happened is my high school friend, a guy I grew up with named Glenn Compton, tremendous guy. He got killed when he was 29 years old. He worked at Lake Norman. But anyway, we used to kid each other a lot. I was a little guy, small. He was a big guy. He was about 6'4" and weighed 320-some pounds. Huge guy, great football player. What happened is that I had literally had to take 2 subjects in summer school to graduate, and they would not allow me to walk across the stage. My mom tried to get them to let me carry a fake diploma or give me a fake diploma, and they wouldn't do it. So I ended up going to the beach, but my buddy Glenn told everybody that I was last. I was the worst student in our class, and it kind of stuck. And that's where it came from.
Oh, okay.
but so we did do our research. Everybody else graduated at the end of the school period except me.
Oh, well, I think that counts as true.
And so
yeah.
I am literally the last of I was the worst student in the class, and that's actually, truthfully, the way it happened. So, and actually the first graduation I ever attended in my life, I was the speaker. And
what was that about? Was it one of your colleges?
Well, it was no. It was I spoke at A.L. Brown High School, and I have since I have 8 honorary degrees, and my most recent one was Lipscomb University, and it's a university in Nashville. It's a Christian university that I've donated. Of course, it cost me, okay? And but I didn't earn it, and they were referring to me
you
as...
paid tuition.
Yeah, I did. I assure you I did.
Tell people where you mostly live now, and with whom and such.
Well, at this time, I have 3 homes. I have a home. My primary home is in Franklin, Tennessee, where we do a lot of fundraising. I have a little over 50 acres, and I have a beautiful, what I call a car barn, and it's got horsepower in it, not horses. And we do have horses at the farm, but I use it to raise money for charity, and we raise literally millions of dollars. I don't open the barn for people just to come and visit, or I don't sell tickets, but I try to get in their pockets when they come. And so I spend the majority of my time there. We also have a home in Stuart, Florida. We love the warm weather when it gets cold here. And I also have a place in North Carolina mountains at Linville Ridge that we love going to.
When you say we, you mean yourself and your wife,
right? Megan, right?
You got married a couple of years ago. This is your 3rd wife, right?
Right. And we, it was kind of an interesting situation. I was married twice before, and with my first wife, I had 3 children, 2 sons and a daughter, and who are very healthy and doing fine. And so, as you met Megan, she came into my life through a friend that was, she had been married twice before, and her primary goal was she wanted to find a partner, but she wanted that partner to be a Christian. And that was one of the primary things that I was wanting myself. And a dear friend of mine who lived in Florida introduced me to her. And at first I said, no. He sent me pictures. And he said, she's beautiful. I said, I can see that. That's not, the question is, my last wife was not as young as this girl, and she was too young. And so he said, well, you got so much in common. And this guy's wife was Hungarian. She was from Hungary, and she would remind you of Zsa Zsa Gabor, the way she talks. And she was good friends with Megan. And she called Megan and said, I want you to meet George. I think you'll really like him. And she sent some pictures of me. And Megan said, how old is he? And fortunately for me, she lied. And she did. She lied. And she said, she knew exactly how old I was. She said, I really don't know. I think he's about 60, but he looks like he's around 50. And he acts like he's about 25. and I said, you'll really have fun with him. And so anyway, our first date was that we played golf together with the foursome. We had lunch before we played golf, then we had dinner. And we just really hit it off so well, laughing, just had the best time together. And she has become just a tremendous person. She's we have not been apart since we've been together. And she, at my age, I try to work hard and take care of myself. And we ride the bike together. We regularly we work out. She takes care of all my doctor's appointments, and she makes sure that I'm eating right. And I finally got my high school figure back. I weigh 145 pounds.
You look good. I mean, you're doing something right. I think you told me once we were talking, you said you were hoping to make it to 100.
Yeah, that's a goal. That's my goal. If I get close, I'll be tickled. Okay. But that's definitely a goal. My doctor tells me she'll guarantee me in the 90s unless a truck hits me. And so, but I feel real good. I feel health-wise, I feel good. I'm still alert. I still do a lot of speaking, and I really enjoy. I believe in moving. Just keep moving.
We'll be back right after this. Welcome back. Well, let's go to the Hornets a little bit, George. How did you come to have the idea to have an NBA team here, the Charlotte Hornets?
Well, it goes back to my original dream was to own a Major League Baseball team. That was my goal. And but I was, you read in the newspaper about like the George Steinbrenners and people like that were just tough dudes, very wealthy and that type of thing. And, I was doing good, but I wasn't wealthy. And so I just still wanted to check it out. So, first of all, Eddie Einhorn and Jerry Reinsdorf owns the Chicago Bulls. Mm-hmm. They also own the Chicago White Sox.
Right.
And I met Eddie. He introduced me to Bobby Brown, who was the president of the American League at the time. Great guy. I was not a Yankee fan. I was a Dodger fan, but he was an incredible human being. And I talked to him on the phone, and I said, look, they refer to me as being hillbilly, but I am a country boy, and God's blessed me, and I really would like to own a major league team, and I love baseball. And I said, would you just coach me? And if I brought up my financial statement, would you give me some advice? Tell me if I'm loony or if I got a chance? So I went up and met with him, shared my financial statement, and he told me, he said, well, you don't have the resources to buy out a team, but my recommendation would be you got enough you could buy in. And once you buy in, and you're younger than most of the guys that are partners, you could end up getting control down the road. And that was his advice. And then his final advice, this was Uberoff. He said, George, Charlotte is too small for Major League Baseball. He said they play 160 games a year, and you don't have the population to support that. And he said, why don't you consider the NBA?
Peter Uberoff.
He told me that. And I said, and he said, looked at me, he said, you're in basketball country. And I said, I've heard that. You're absolutely right. So, and he said, they're expanding. And I said, really? And he said, yeah, you ought to go over and talk to David Stern. True story. It sounds kind of crazy, but it just shows the umption I had at the time. I could use the other reference, but I won't use that. But I went over and he told me where the NBA offices were. It was very close to where they were, right off Fifth Avenue. And so I walked to the NBA's office.
Just showed up?
Just showed up.
No appointment?
No appointment or nothing. And I remember when I walked in, and this young lady was the receptionist. She said, can I help you? And I said, yes, ma'am, I'd like to see David Stern. And she said, do you have an appointment? And I said, no, I don't, but it's really important. And she said, what's it about? And I said, well, I understand the NBA is expanding, and I want to apply for one of those teams. And she said, well, have a seat, Mr. Shinn. I'd already given her my name, and I didn't have a calling card. And I sat down. Next thing I knew, Russ Granite, who was the deputy commissioner at the time, walked out. And he said, Mr. Shinn, you interested in a expansion team and in Charlotte? And I said, yes, sir, I am. And he said, what state is Charlotte in?
No way.
He did. And I wanted to. I felt like walking out on him, but I didn't. And I said, we're from Charlotte, North Carolina. And so he said, well, we'll chat with you. I'll chat with you a little bit. So Gary Bettman, you know who Gary is. Gary's the commissioner of the NHL now, but he was one of the key lawyers with the NBA at the time. I sat down with Russ and Gary Bettman and talked to him about Charlotte and what, I was wanting to do. And they didn't have all this electronics and stuff back then, no cell phones. But I'm convinced that David Stern was listening in his office. And during the conversation, he walked in, had a cigar, smoking a cigar, and true story. And he started asking me where Charlotte was. And he did. And it was just, it was, the whole thing was really quite amazing. And he asked me how big the market was. He was starting, and I was blowing smoke. I really didn't have accurate information.
Yeah.
And what I was taking in consideration was not the city of Charlotte, but I was taking in the whole metropolitan area, which included part of South Carolina. And it sounded good. I was proud of myself. It sounded really good. So David said, well, there are a number of other people that's applying for. We don't know how many franchises we're going to give, but if you want to throw your hat in the ring, I'll give you an application. And I said, how much is the application fee? He said $100,000. And I said, is it refundable? And he said, well, if you're so bullish about Charlotte, yeah, it'll be deducted from whatever the franchise is. And I said, well, I'm game. I'm in. Let me. So he gave me an application and went back and filled it out. That's how the thing got started. And then it got to the point that I was so determined to make this happen. I just felt like, I was told that, yes, it's basketball country, but it's really up in the Tar Heel state and around, college basketball country. Mm-hmm. And I just thought, if people loved college ball, they'd love to see the pros play.
The best in the world.
I believed in it so much that I just kept pursuing it. And when we made our announcements and whatever, and I sent out the word, I will come and speak to anybody that will listen. And I don't charge. I won't charge you a penny. And if you serving dinner, I'll pay for my own meal. I'll pay for my own expenses getting there. If you live in north of South Carolina, I'll come. And I was averaging 3 and 4 speeches a week. And so people were making $100 deposits to be in line to get season tickets. And I remember one city council meeting in Charlotte. John Belk was the mayor at the time. Mm-hmm. And I had to I was telling them I was wanting to bring a sports franchise to Charlotte. And I remember at that meeting they were 10, could have been 20 different people that all were making a pitch. Well, they waited to last for me. And I remember standing up to talk, and John Belk didn't help. He said, we got an old boy here from Kannapolis, North Carolina, has a dream of bringing a franchise to Charlotte. Let's hear what he's got to say. And I felt, my gosh, what kind of introduction's that? But I stood up and started talking, and I almost fell. I don't know if you've ever had this experience. It's the first time in my life it ever happened to me, but my legs were just trembling. I mean, trembling. It was like a little gate across the thing. I kind of leaned over on it, and it helped me.
Was it on to city council or something?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. But as a result of that, and then I had to go up and make a presentation to the NBA owners, and I was so afraid. I said, my God, I don't know how they're going to have me situated there, but if my legs start shaking, they're not going to give me anything. And so I flew up to New York, and the night before, I stayed in it wasn't one of the nicer hotels. And I remember getting up that morning, and I got on my knees, started praying. And I said, Lord, I can't do this by myself. I'm scared to death. I just don't feel like I can do a good job. I've practiced. I'm ready. Just be with me. Help me. And I recall I raised the window to get some fresh air. It smelled musky in the hotel. And horns were blowing and everything else. And that's when I was praying. I got to thinking, Lord, I don't know if the Lord can hear me. So I decided I would walk out. And I said, there's got to be another church on 5th Avenue. So I kept walking all the way up to Saks Fifth Avenue, and the Catholic Church was there, St. Patrick's Cathedral. And I said, well, I know Jesus is in there somewhere. I'm going to go in and talk to him. I know this sounds crazy, but please believe me, it's true. And I was kind of brassy, I know, but I walked in, and Megan's Catholic and I'm Protestant. I'm a Baptist, but she goes to my church, I go to hers, and we love the same Lord, so it's all good. And I remember walking in, I saw people lighting candles. So I looked around, and had a huge statue of Christ on the cross up front. So I went down, got on my knees, and I started praying. And I just talked to God. I said, God, I'm scared to death. Please be with me. I need you to be with me. I can't do this by myself. And I recall leaving, and as I was leaving, I started feeling better. And I had to go and make my presentation. Scott, I knocked it out of the park. I really did an incredible job. Yeah. I didn't have a note or anything. I just stood up. I was so determined. And then when I mentioned that I've also got a contract, and I had something from Harvey Gantt, mayor, that said that we'll give him a lease for $1 a year. And when I passed that up and they read that to the one guy in the back, said, well, hell, I'm moving my team to Charlotte. So that had more to do with it, I think, than anything. And then the final day of the expansion committee was meeting on April Fool's Day. And that was 1987.
Sounds right.
And I got a call from David saying, George, I'll call you today. The expansion committee's meeting. I'll call you today and let you know what's what. And I said, okay. So I recall I was in the office. I thought I'd get a call by 5 o'clock. Didn't happen. I stayed at the office till 8 o'clock. No call. And I started, for the first time, feeling so negative. I said, he's not calling me because he's going to wait till in the morning so I can get a decent night's sleep. And so I drove home, started driving home. It was close to 9 o'clock. I pulled in the garage. And when I pulled in, of course, the garage door opened up. I pulled in, and the steps going into the house, my son opened the door, Chris, and who's my oldest child, and hollered down and said, Dad, David Stern called you. You need to get in here and call him back. And I said, oh, gosh, he's called me this late. It's not good news. And so I was taking my time getting out, and Chris came opened the door, said, Dad, get in here and call him back. David Stern's the commissioner. I said, Chris, I know who David Stern is. And I said, I cannot let my family see me crying. So I got to find a room that's got a private phone in it, and it just so happened that we didn't have cell phones, but in our master bathroom, we had and the toilet was just room enough for a toilet, and I had a phone in there. And we had a door you could close, so I could close the bedroom door, the bathroom door, and the toilet door. And nobody could hear me cry.
You were locked tight.
Yeah, and I sit down on that seat and called him back. And I remember as clear as it is now that this girl answered the phone, and she was so cheerful. It was 9 p.m. And she said, good evening, NBA. And I said, Miss, this is George Shinn. I'm returning Commissioner Stern's call. Hold on. And you know, when you're waiting on something like that, it seems like forever.
Yeah.
And then I waited, and Russ Granite came on the phone. And he said, George, David's busy right now. You want to hold, or would you like to have me have him call you back? I said, no, I don't want to lose connection. No. I want to find out what's going on. I said, what is going on, Russ? He said, David will tell you. If you heard it like that, you would think, oh my gosh, it is bad news. And so eventually David came on the phone, and he didn't say hello or anything. He said, George. And I said, yes, David. He said, look, the day's April Fool's Day. But what I'm about to tell you is not an April Fool's joke. He said, I'm calling you first because you have been selected first. Scott, I lost it. I started crying. It was so emotional time in my life. I just could not believe it. I remember driving to Max Mulliman's house, and I could hardly talk to him. I was crying so much. We was hugging each other and kissing each other. It was crazy.
We'll be back right after this. Welcome back.
And I want to thank particularly the fans for you. Without you, we wouldn't have this dream. And I also want to thank God for giving me the strength to keep moving forward. Thank you so much for supporting the Hornets. I love you very much. Thank you.
So that's a great story, George, about the all the permutations about how the Hornets came to be. Amazing. I've never heard all of that. So I want to ask you about some of your very best moments in Charlotte as the owner, and also some of your very worst moments. You played your first game and your first season, and I know you've mentioned before those were significant milestones.
Yeah, the first game we played Cleveland, and I think we lost by 40-some points. And there were thousands of people that just stayed cheering the team afterwards. Said, boy, we made it now. This is something else. It was really crazy.
He had the rebound taken away by Trapuka.
And I remember we had an exhibition game, and we had to submit everything to the NBA to get their approval. For anything you do, you got to tell them. They got to approve it or disapprove it. And I got a call from David, and he told me that you can't do the prayer. And I said, David, why would you tell me I couldn't do a prayer before the game? And I said, I own the franchise. He said, well, you might own a franchise, but I control all the franchises, and you can't do it. And I said, David, I'm going to do it. I'm in the Bible Belt, and I made a promise, and God's one of the reasons this thing has worked for me, and I'm going to do this. And if you want to fight me, I'm going to fight you on it. And he said, let me call you back. So an hour or 2 hours passed before the game. He called me and said, George, I tell you what, I'm going to let you do it, but the only way I'm going to let you do it is you can never do it in front of TV audiences and TV. You can do it before the game starts, and as long as it's not on television, be all right. I said, well, what's the problem? He said, you want to do it? That's the only way you can do it. I said, okay. So, and I told him, I said, I'm going to have rabbis too, and all different religions here, so it'll be fine. That was what I did, try to honor the Lord. And I got some grief from some of your guys at the Observer.
Yeah.
No, not negative. It was really, I was compared to the circus guy, Barnum or Badium.
P.T. Barnum?
Yeah. Shinn used, he's getting preachers coming, and he's notifying the churches that they can buy tickets to hear their preacher and he's selling tickets. And I was. It's just
that
like,
was true.
It was true.
There were a lot of glory years here. You sold out every game, 24,000 seats. Just an amazing 8 years in a row.
103-102 Boston. Charlotte out of timeouts. Here's Morning, the shot. Good! Game over!
You had some really good teams, 50-win teams over and over. Place was absolutely packed. So it eventually went wrong, though, for you here. And what do you attribute that to?
Well, it was really a combination of things. But I believe that God puts us through struggles to make us stronger. And it certainly drew me closer to Him as a result of some stupid decisions I've made, bad judgment decisions. But I think things happen sometime for a reason. That and when the referendum happened the way it did, I really had no choice.
The referendum you're referring to is when you were trying to build a new arena uptown. It was put to a vote, of Charlotte voters, and if I remember, 57% of the people voted no. They then ran an end around it, and that arena has been in Uptown Charlotte since 2004, probably pretty much very similar to the one you wanted to build. They ended up kind of bypassing the referendum through some political maneuverings, but in any case, you moved your franchise to New Orleans. But before that, you told me at one point in another interview that you thought the referendum, partly that you lost it because people in Charlotte had lost confidence in you. Do you explain that a little bit?
Well, I brought in a partner because of the situation I found myself in, and I was dealing with a lot of negatives myself, and having a family with 3 young children, and going to the local schools there, and I just it made sense it was time to move on, and that I was not going to get the building I needed to survive, and what we needed was club seats and more suites, and so you can charge bigger and get more money from it, and the old building didn't have that possibility.
Charlotte Coliseum, if I remember, was ultimately obsolete almost from the day it opened, right, in terms of club seating and PSLs, all these things that now are a huge part of the revenue stream. But back then weren't, right? I mean, that wasn't, correct. People didn't know that.
Well, it's one reason that helped us lead the league in attendance for so many years, because we had so many seats.
Yeah.
We had a lot of seats, but none of the big cash seats. No club seating, and I think we had like 6 suites or something like that. It was very small. And so we had to do something, and for whether if people just didn't like me anymore, or whatever, I don't know. But I brought in a partner that at the time was probably a mistake. There were some other cities that would have been a lot better than New Orleans, but my partner wanted to go to New Orleans. He'd worked out a side deal, and it was just, and the league was not wanting to go back either. So, but anyway, we went. I was embraced. It was quite an experience, and then we went through really crazy situation with Hurricane Katrina.
Moved to Oklahoma City.
Yeah, we and that was I remember during right after the storm, it was just unbelievable. So we had no choice. We had to relocate for a couple of years, and so we went to Oklahoma City, and that was quite an experience. And a lot of wealthy guys there in the oil business and whatever wanted to buy the team, and they offered me an incredible deal that I just felt like I had to move back to New Orleans. And a lot of businesses were moving out of New Orleans. Half of our fan base moved out, and but I just couldn't find it in my heart to leave. I just decided to stay, and then during that time, I was diagnosed with prostate cancer, and that I feel like that was again part of the master's plan that got me out of the business and got me to doing what I should have been doing earlier, and that would be serving him more.
You've given back in Charlotte. If I remember, it was a $7.5 million donation to tell us about that, the Stroke Center. Yeah, which you had a very personal experience with.
Yeah, what happened, Felix Sabatas. Felix is quite the character. I love Felix.
Yeah.
He was on the board at the hospital. He called me. This was a couple of years ago. And he said, George, I'm calling. We're trying to raise money for the stroke centers. Tell me all the good stuff. I said, how much, Felix? And he said, will you do $10 million? And I said, Felix, $10 million? I can't write you a check for $10 million. He said, yeah, but you can work it out. And then I said, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll give you 5. And he said, George, this stroke center saved your life. And it did. And I said, Felix, you playing a hard game here, aren't you?
That's a big trump card there.
Yeah, and then after he said that, he said, I tell you what, why don't we just split the difference and you do 7.5? I said, all right, I'll do it. And that's how it came about.
People are benefiting from your generosity, and you're blessed and you're blessing others. And I'll say, and I wonder if you disagree with this, but I'm not sure you ever would have left Charlotte I think the only mistake you really made was, well, several mistakes, but the one where you disappeared. There was a trial on court TV, for those who don't know, which you won, but there was a lot of behavior that you had to admit to on the stand that I think hurt you in the Bible Belt. But at that point, even then, I think you were, and you don't let me put words in your mouth, but I think if you had said, look, I messed up, I'm so sorry.
No, I totally agree with you. I was embarrassed. I made a mistake. I was worried about my children, and it ended up my wife filed for divorce. So my life at that point was somewhat destroyed. And I was embarrassed, and I just, you can only take so much. So I just felt like that once I moved and went to New Orleans, I started doing the same things in New Orleans. I'm talking about the good stuff.
Right.
And I didn't start screwing around there, I assure you that. Yeah. But no,
I knew where you were going.
And they embraced me. It was really, and we were making it work until the storm hit.
The storm was
and it was
devastating. A lot.
Oh my gosh,
so
it was
just.
But I look at it. I'm really proud because one reporter there and wrote a story. I never even thought about it, but he said George Shinn is the reason for 10% of the teams in the league. And if you think about it, that's basically true. That Charlotte, New Orleans, and Oklahoma City.
Well, the last thing, George, that I'd like to ask you is just if, as you look forward now at age 81, what do you want to do with however many years you have left?
Well, I'm trying to extend the years by taking care of myself, and I got a wonderful wife that's helping me. When I'm in Florida, I ride my bike 20 miles 5 days a week. Traffic's too bad in Tennessee to do that, and the mountains are too high in North Carolina mountains. So, but I still work out and try to stay in shape. So physically, I'm in really good shape, and I just I still enjoy going and speak because I like to motivate and lift people up, and who hasn't been through troubles and problems, and I try to encourage them, don't give up. I have been blessed with Charlotte and with the people there. I'm so grateful for how they lifted me up and embraced me, and I think I owe them something. And I'm coming back. I'm going to do all I can to help. There'll be other things that I'll be reaching out to help, and it's just something I want to do, and I will do it. And I do love Charlotte, and I love the people. I know most of them are new, and they don't know who I am, but there are a lot of old-timers. I realized when I went through my last marriage, she lived in Charlotte, and I didn't want to come back to Charlotte because I was afraid people still remembered me, and that was a mistake. I should have come back and just said, look, I made a stupid decision, and David Stern told me that I ought to, and I didn't follow his advice. He said, y'all just say, look, I made a bad judgment decision. Don't admit to doing anything, but just say I made a bad decision. and just move on. And a lot of times I didn't listen to David, and that was one of them I probably should have. But anyway, I've made some mistakes that I'm not proud of. I've done a lot of good things that I'm very, very proud of, and the proud way outweighs the bad. I promise you that.
I believe you. And you put Charlotte on the map. I tell you what, Russ Granick knows where it is now, I bet, right?
He does.
Well, George Shinn, I can't thank you enough for being with us on Sports Legends of the Carolinas. We'll just close with, if there's anything that you would like to, I don't know, tell the audience or anything like that about your time in Charlotte.
Well, the only thing I'd like to do is to make comments to people to, no matter what their circumstances, if they're struggling now, if they've made bad decisions like I have, and if they've stumbled, failed, just get up and keep moving forward. And I think that is the best advice I could give them. My mom gave me that, and she said, son, there are going to be dark days in your life. There are going to be times in your life when you just can't believe what's happening. It could be loss of a spouse, it could be loss of a child, it could be anything that's going to happen. But I want you to remember that the most powerful thing you could do is during the darkest hours of your life is having the strength to get down on your knees and ask God for guidance. And I believe that with every fiber of my body.
That's George Shinn. I'm Scott Fowler. Thank you for joining us on Sports Legends of the Carolinas. Remember, you'll find much more about this interview and about all of our guests, including Steph Curry, Roy Williams, Dale Earnhardt Jr., and Dawn Staley, in our Sports Legends book. It's scheduled to be published in fall of 2023. Pre-order your copy now at sportslegendsbook.com. Thanks so much for listening to Sports Legends of the Carolinas, a production of the Charlotte Observer. This show is produced by Lume Ali Sally, Jeff Seiner, and Cotta Stevens. The sports editor of the Charlotte Observer is Lydia Craver, and the executive editor is Raina Cash. Davin Coburn is McClatchy's director of audio. For lots more sports content and to continue supporting this kind of work, please visit charlotteobserver.com and consider a digital subscription. And connect with me on Twitter at Scott_Fowler or email at sfowler@charlotteobserver.com. See you next time.